The waves crashed against the cliffs of Madeira, sending salty mist into the air as Cristiano Ronaldo leaned back in his chair, staring at the ocean. He'd spent years conquering the world, winning trophies, shattering records, and building a legacy that would last generations. But here, in his hometown, surrounded by childhood friends, he felt something different, something grounding. Laughter echoed across the cafe terrace, the warm breeze carrying the scent of freshly baked bread and espresso. It was a rare moment of peace. Then the mood shifted. The childhood friend, his expression suddenly somber, leaned in and said, "Chris, have you heard about Antonio?" The name alone transported him back to the dusty fields of his boyhood. Antonio, his first coach, the man who had seen promise in a scrawny kid with oversized dreams, the same man who had pushed him, trained him, scolded him, and shaped him into the player he had become. Cristiano frowned. What about him? A heavy silence fell over the table before his friend spoke again. "He's not doing well, Chris. The club let him go. Said he was too old. They took his apartment and now he's living in some rundown hotel." Cristiano's grip tightened around his glass. Antonio, the man who had dedicated his life to shaping players, discarded like an old jersey no one wanted anymore. It didn't make sense. Not Antonio, the mentor who had spent years in the rain, the sun, the cold, guiding kids with nothing but a whistle and a fire in his heart. Not the man who had once told him, "If you work harder than everyone else, one day the world will know your name." That night, sleep refused to come. The thought of Antonio, alone, forgotten, clawed at Cristiano's mind. He had seen countless people rise and fall in football, but some deserved more. Some deserved to be remembered. The next morning he made his decision. He was going to find Antonio. The streets of Madeira were unchanged, but Cristiano felt different walking them now. He had left this island a boy and returned a legend, but none of that mattered today. What mattered was the man who had shaped his first steps on this journey. After some asking around, he found the hotel. It was worse than he imagined. Faded walls, broken lights, the kind of place where time had given up. He stepped inside, the dimly lit lobby nearly empty. The air smelled of old furniture and cheap disinfectant, the kind of place where time seemed to settle like dust. A tired receptionist barely looked up from behind the counter as Cristiano walked past, his footsteps echoing against the worn tile floor. Room 206, that's what they had told him. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heartbeat steady, but something in his chest felt heavier with every step. He knocked on the door, a long pause, then the handle turned and the door creaked open. And there he was, Antonio. His hair had greyed, his face more lined than before, but the sharp eyes, the same ones that had once watched over Cristiano's every move on the pitch, still held something fierce beneath the weight of years. But there was something else too, a weariness, the kind that settled in when a man had fought too many battles and had nothing left to fight for. Cristiano, Antonio's voice was hoarse, as if the word itself carried disbelief, as if he wasn't sure he was truly seeing the boy he once coached standing in front of him. Cristiano smiled, but it was laced with sorrow. "Coach." For a moment neither of them moved. Then Antonio stepped back, nodding toward the small room behind him. "Come in." Inside, the space was barely furnished. A suitcase in the corner, a pile of newspapers on the table, a single chair. A flickering bedside lamp cast weak shadows across the walls. Cristiano sat on the edge of the bed, watching as Antonio lowered himself into the chair with effort, his joints stiff, his movements slower than they used to be. "I heard you were back," Antonio said, his voice lighter now but edged with something unspoken. "Didn't think you'd come looking for an old man like me." Cristiano held his gaze, his expression unwavering. "You're not just an old man, you're the man who shaped me." Antonio let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. "Still know how to sweet talk, I see." Cristiano's lips curved into a faint smile. "It's not sweet talk if it's the truth, coach." A silence settled between them, heavy with the weight of years and the things neither had said. The dim light flickered slightly, casting shadows across Antonio's face, making the lines of hardship even more pronounced. Antonio exhaled slowly. "So, tell me, Chris, what fair wind brings you here?" Cristiano's throat tightened. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but firm. "I heard what happened." Antonio chuckled dryly. News travels fast when it's bad. He shrugged, as if trying to make light of it, but Cristiano could see through it. The years of dedication, of passion had led to this, a quiet, forgotten ending. "Why didn't you tell me?" Cristiano's voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the weight behind it. Antonio let out a slow breath, leaning back in his chair. "And then what? You'd have dropped everything to come save an old man?" He shook his head. "Life moves on, Chris. The club wanted something new, something younger. I was just another piece of the past they swept away. That's football. That's life." Cristiano's jaw tightened. No, not this time, not this man. He looked around the dimly lit room, at the faded walls and the single worn-out chair, the kind of place that made a person feel smaller with every passing day. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. He had been given a life beyond imagination, fame, fortune, respect, and yet the man who had laid the foundation for it all was sitting in a dark room, alone. His gaze snapped back to Antonio, fierce and unwavering. "No, that's not how it should go. Not for you, coach. Not after everything you've given." In the days that followed, Ronaldo dug deeper into the club's situation. The new owners, businessmen with no love for the game, had stripped it of its heart. They had fired staff who'd been there for decades, prioritizing profit over passion. He made his decision quickly. He wasn't just going to help Antonio, he was going to take back the club that had abandoned him. Rumours spread like wildfire. Cristiano Ronaldo was in talks to purchase the very club that had turned its back on Antonio. The boardroom was tense. The owners were hesitant. They thought Ronaldo was here to invest, to lend his name. But when he spoke, his voice was steel. "I don't want a stake in the club," he said, his eyes locked onto theirs. "I want the club." Silence, then uneasy murmurs. Offers were thrown, counter-offers followed. But there are things in this world that money cannot refuse, and one of them is Cristiano Ronaldo sitting across from you, determined to take back what should have never been lost. Days later, the papers screamed the news. Cristiano Ronaldo buys his childhood club in stunning takeover. Fans erupted in celebration, but they didn't know the full story. This wasn't just about football. It wasn't just about business. It wasn't even about legacy. This was something deeper. This was redemption. Then came the moment no one saw coming. Ronaldo personally called Antonio to the stadium. The old coach arrived, his steps slow, his brow furrowed with uncertainty. But as he stepped onto the pitch, he stopped short. The stands weren't empty. They were filled. Players, staff, fans. Faces from every chapter of his past had gathered. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. And then, from the centre of it all, Ronaldo stepped forward, microphone in hand. "This man," he said, his voice steady, "built this club. He shaped legends. He was never just a coach. He was its soul, and today he takes his rightful place." The announcement sent shockwaves through the crowd. Ronaldo had not only reinstated Antonio, he had appointed him as the club's new technical director. The ovation was deafening, a tribute long overdue. Antonio stood frozen, his eyes glistening, before Ronaldo placed a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome home, coach." In the weeks that followed, Antonio walked through the club like a man reborn. His presence alone reinvigorated the players, his wisdom shaping a new generation. And one evening, as he stood beside Ronaldo, watching a training session, he whispered, "I never asked for anything, but this is everything." Ronaldo smiled. "Some debts can never be repaid, but this is the least I could do." And as the sun set over the stadium, one truth remained unshaken. Greatness isn't just about winning, it's about remembering where you came from and never forgetting those who helped you rise.